This week on Foods with Flavor, we have a special guest in the house. My daughter's here and she's going to show us how to make cheese pizza from scratch. So to make the yeast starter, we're going to use 1 cup of lukewarm water, 2 heaping teaspoons of yeast, and 1/4 teaspoon of sugar to help feed the yeast. So we're going to let that rise for 5 minutes, and then you're going to pour it into a mixture of flour, baking soda, salt, and olive oil. And so once that is done, mix that up. And then you're going to let that sit for a few minutes before you knead the dough. So once that's sat, in this case I'm using a mixer, so that's a kneading hook that I have hooked up. And I'm going to start kneading that dough until it stops sticking to the bowl and is soft and not sticky to your finger. So you'll see in the beginning I'll add more flour. You don't want to add too much at one time, because if you add too much, you've basically ruined the dough. So you're gonna add that slowly. You can see here it's sticking to the bottom, so I'm just adding a little bit more. And once I think I have it done, and it usually takes about 5 minutes at least of kneading, so I'll touch it and see how sticky it is. And so in this case, I just add a little bit more flour. You don't want to add too much or the whole dough will get too dry and fall apart. So once that is done, you're going to go get like a washcloth or a towel that is warm and wet and cover that for about 2 hours. Now after about an hour and a half, I came in and I punched the dough down. And then punched the dough down a second time. And that's it. So once the dough is ready, you're going to divide it into 3 equal parts. And so I've given her one of the pieces of dough, and we have a floured board that she's going to be rolling that out on. So it's much easier for children or when you're just starting out to use a rolling pin. So this is a really small rolling pin. It makes it easier for them to handle. So she's been using this for years. So one thing, you just want to make sure that there's enough flour on the dough that it doesn't start sticking to the board below. So here she's flipped it over and then she's going to reflour it to keep that part from sticking. So you're going to roll this out to about 10 or 12 inches, really any size you want. Obviously the thinner the dough, the thinner the crust. So the next step is to get a board here and just cover that in cornmeal. If you don't use enough cornmeal, the pizza dough is going to stick to the wood and you're never going to get it in the oven. So you can see it was kind of a while here as we were taping and getting hot, and that dough was sticking to the board. So one thing that I always do is just a thin coat of olive oil. So not only does it give flavor, it kind of gets a nice crust on the bottom of the dough. So the next step here is, and this is just a canned tomato sauce. I'll show you later in this video one that I made. But this, if she's a child, that's what she likes. And so they can put as much or as little as they want. The next step can be difficult for a little bit younger kids. Usually I will pre-grate the cheese for them. It just makes it easier. But here she's showing you how to hand grate some fresh mozzarella cheese, and this is whole milk. I do not like skim milk mozzarella cheese. So here it is after baking in the oven at 495 degrees on a pizza stone. And the last step is to cut and enjoy. So here's a sauce variation. This is something that adults are gonna like, and it's actually simple and quick to make. So I just make this right before. So I've added some onions to hot olive oil. Then I added petite diced tomatoes, some sugar. This is coarse sea salt, fresh oregano, and I'm just gonna stir that together and let it simmer for a few minutes. So the next thing I'm adding is just a pesto. So you could optionally add fresh garlic and basil. I just didn't have any, so pesto will work in this case. So once it was done, I just covered it with the lid and let it rest until I was ready for it. So here's a pizza crust I made. And so notice on this, not only am I putting olive oil on it, but I'm also spreading a thin layer of pesto, and I almost always do this. So now I'm adding that fresh sauce that I just made, and you can put on really as much or as little as you want. It's really up to you. The next ingredient here is a freshly grated Pecorino Romano cheese. This is optional, you don't have to. Then I'm adding fresh mozzarella. This is whole milk mozzarella, not part skim. Part skim is just not very creamy and dries out. Tastes like wax. So the only ingredients I had in the house were onions and pepperoni, so this pizza is getting onions and pepperoni. And the last thing you're going to do is bake that at 495 degrees for about 5 to 6 minutes until it's done. Don't forget to subscribe, follow me on social media, and click on the link below to see a recommended video.